Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Durgadas Duriel, who's here to share with us his new book, Worthy as You Are. Weed out unhealthy beliefs and nourish your authentic self. Now, Durgadas is a licensed clinical social worker and a certified holistic health practitioner working in private practice. He's a formal practitioner of magic with more than 20 years of experience and has practiced yoga and meditation for over 15 years. He holds a master's degree in social welfare from UCLA. So let's welcome to the show, Durgadas Duriel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. So, Worthy as You Are, tell us, what inspired you to write this?
Yeah, so I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm also a person who's been on my own journey of healing throughout much of my adult life. And it was my experiences of healing and my experiences of facilitating the healing of others that really inspired me to write this book. I came to appreciate that there is such a profound sense of wellness that many of us can find within ourselves through practicing certain techniques. And I wanted to share them with other people.
Well, you touch on one, and you got so much great information in this book, but you touch on one that talks about compassionate thinking. And my
hmm
goodness, I think everyone needs that today, regardless where we are on that spectrum. So why is this a part of your work?
Yeah, compassionate thinking is really at the center of my personal life now and also my outlook as a therapist. And the reason why it is part of my work is because I have seen it provide amazing healing within people's lives, not just in how they feel about themselves, but also in their relationships. It really centers around empathy and wisdom and contacting our inner knowing and then applying that in our everyday experiences. And it's just a way of really trying to understand each other and understand ourselves. And so much healing can come even from that alone.
Well, I love how in your book you talk about the inner gardening that we need to do. And I'd love for you to expand on that for our listeners.
Yeah, so the inner garden is a metaphor that I use for the mind. And basically, I approach it with the idea that our minds are like gardens. And as we grow up, we are given seeds from other people that are sort of planted in those gardens. And by the time that we're old enough to think very independently and maturely, our gardens are full of a lot of plants. And for many of us, these plants are weeds. Not all of them, but many of them. And we have power, though, in the here and now to weed this garden and plant supportive thoughts in their place, compassionate thoughts, loving thoughts, empathetic thoughts, supportive thoughts. And so a lot of the work in the book is about that. It's about learning how to weed this inner garden and plant supportive, compassionate thoughts in place of what was there before. Yeah, and then that can revolutionize our experiences of our own well being. It can help us heal from wounding from the past, improve our relationships, and just generally the quality of our lives.
Now, when it comes to negative self talk, is that something that people really struggle with and have a tough time overcoming?
Absolutely. I would say, as a therapist, that that's one of the number one things that I encounter, both in terms of people who are experiencing depression and anxiety, and also just are generally having difficulties in their lives. I think there are so many messages that so many of us receive every day from sources telling us that we're not good enough as we are, or there's something that we need to change. And then that manifests for many in negative self-talk. We could get it from our families, our community, our society, etc. Yeah, so it's a huge issue in many, many people today. And what's in this book is really one approach to dealing with it.
Well, you're so kind in your book. You could see the compassion that comes through because I look at it as negative thoughts, and you talk about challenging, unsupportive thoughts. And
hmm
I think the languaging makes such a big difference because then we get out of that good, bad, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that it is so important in this process, and this is part of compassionate thinking, to not shame ourselves as much as possible for being wherever we are and for thinking whatever we think. I mean, the thoughts that are with us for a reason. And the reason is usually because of external influences or our reactions to trauma when we have negative thinking or mental illness or something like that. And so I think that there are ways of using language, and I talk about this some in the book, that fosters greater self-compassion. I also don't usually use the term positive thoughts because sometimes that also can take people into a place of shaming themselves, honestly, where they feel like, well, I should only think positively all the time. And if I don't do that, I'm bad. Right. And so my work is more about let's try to be compassionate with ourselves wherever we are, kind to ourselves, and then move in the direction of greater well-being. And in my experience, that does create a positive mindset, what is commonly thought of as a positive mindset, but one that isn't really about I must feel this way. I should feel this way. It's just about let's be kind to ourselves and then just keep doing that. Right. And understanding and just keep doing that. And one thing I wanted to add to what I said at the very beginning is, I experienced a lot of bullying when I was growing up from a very young age for about 10 years and really did not have the message that I was worthy as I am. And so when I came to learn that I am in my own experience and see how healing that was, I felt inspired to share that with others, both as a therapist and as a writer.
In your experience, is it something that when people get out of that good, bad kind of talk, that it's easier for them to kind of get into a place where they can be compassionate themselves? Because I would think that that's kind of difficult.
Yeah, one of the best exercises that I know for doing this, which is in the book and is very common in cognitive behavioral therapy, because you're right, it can be difficult, is to practice trying to speak to yourself as you would a close friend. Sort of like if you wouldn't say it to a close friend, don't say it to yourself. And I think that a lot of people, when they look at their thoughts from that lens, would I say this to someone else? And the answer immediately oftentimes is no. That helps provide some of that clarity, right? And that understanding and facilitates the process.
I think that's so positive and just really empowering. It's like, really, if you're not going to say it to any of your really good friends, don't say it.
Hmm. Yeah, because many of us are walking around saying absolutely horrible things to ourselves that we would never say to anyone else. And not giving ourselves the grace or the slack or the benefit of the doubt that we would give to lots of other people. And one of the other points in terms of the inner gardening is that for most of us, this is learned. It's not that we started this way, it's that we picked this up. And through processes like those in the book, we can learn how to set this down and really come to a greater sense of our own well-being, our own healing, and help connect with the parts of us that know the deeper parts of us that are, there's a spiritual dimension to the book too, that know that we are sacred, that know that we are worthy. It's still in there. It's just a matter of getting to it.
Before we have all that generational programming,
Mhm.
from what our parents learned, their parents, and so on up our family tree.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's a really important point, which is that for many of us, some of the messages of shame and negative self talk and judgment and criticism that we are walking around with have been in our families for generations or have been passed down in our society for generations. One area I focus on in this book is shame around our physical bodies. And so much messaging comes to so many of us from a multitude of sources about that and has been passed down generationally. And, the work falls upon those of us who are doing healing practices now to try to shift that, and not just for ourselves, but also people in the future. Hopefully, if we can stop some of this now, we can really make a difference. And then other people, and I will say, I think we already have to a certain extent when it comes to body shame, because a lot of people in Gen Z are much healthier about this than my generation and the generations before. And it's been very inspiring to see that. I'm not saying everyone is, but there's a real difference in the cultural trend of that generation from what I've seen.
Well, that's exciting to hear. You see these changes that are taking place. Yeah, I think we just have some other folks who would probably include my generation that need to, maybe embrace some of this and really
Yeah.
just, know it's okay.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the real center of the book is looking at different areas of our lives where we've received messages of you're not good enough, you're not worthy as you are. You need to climb all these mountains to prove that you have value. And then just questioning them. That's a real fundamental part of CBT, and it's a part of the practice in the book. Questioning the negative thoughts we've received, and then what do we put in their place? What do we want to believe now? And like I said before, the book is very spiritual. So there's when you connect with your spirit, when you connect with your heart, when you connect with your inner knowing, what would you say to that good friend, for example, about how they feel about their career, about how they feel about relationships, about how they feel about their home or whatever, money, whatever the situation is? And because can we get out of the mindset that we're less than, just as we are right now? And I've seen this really revolutionize people's experience of well-being, even in small doses. And that's another part of compassionate thinking. It's not all or nothing. We do the best we can. For many of us, when we're talking about body shame again, we've grown up with this our whole lives. It's in societal messaging, media, all around us from many different angles. And for some of us, we're not going to totally heal that, but that doesn't mean we can't find profound improvement from where we are. And that's worth it too. However much better we feel is still better, is still worthwhile. And compassionate thinking is just sort of guiding yourself in that direction. And that's what inner gardening is about. Yeah.
I love that. It really gives us the power to make changes and being okay that
Mhm.
these changes are little baby steps.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because part of what happens to people a lot of the time when they don't take baby steps is that the changes that they make are not sustainable. So somebody will be very gung ho about something in their life and, run on sheer willpower maybe for a couple of months at most. And then it sort of breaks down and they revert back to the status quo that they had before. But if we make sustainable change through baby steps and put that at the center of our process, then we sort of climb higher and higher and higher. And if we're compassionate to ourselves, if we center compassion in that work, we're not criticizing ourselves if we falter. We're not criticizing ourselves for not being totally healed tomorrow, and then that also helps us continue on the path. That's another thing that happens. People, have a falter experience and then they give up, partially because of those kinds of stories that we're working to change. Oh, well, of course, this isn't going to work out for me. Of course it can't because, I'm doomed or whatever the negative belief is. But with compassionate self talk, we say, you know what? I tried that. It didn't work that way. Maybe I was pushing too hard. Maybe it's not the right approach for me. But that doesn't mean that I can't keep going. That doesn't mean that I can't get up off the floor, right? And when we're kind to ourselves, we get up off the floor much faster. And we're not sort of as wounded by those kinds of experiences. I mean, really, compassionate thinking, in my experience, I sometimes I call it the philosopher's stone of inner work because it has such a powerful ability to take negative thoughts, take negative experiences or unsupportive thoughts or unsupportive experiences and help us really integrate them and heal and see our lives in healthier ways and process our experiences in healthier ways.
So if negative beliefs is at somebody's core
Mhm.
and it's something that, generations have been talking about, they have just been so ingrained with this.
Yeah.
Is this something that they can really work through over time?
In my experience, in many cases, the answer to that is yes. Now, not always. Like in the example I was saying with body shame, I mean, sometimes the messaging is so relentless around us that we just do our best. But even if we don't fully heal it and just make a lot of progress, I still think that that is totally worthwhile. For example, I would say that there are some negative beliefs that I grew up with that are still there on a very low volume. a very low setting. And then the beliefs that I've affirmed are much louder, much more resonant, much truer in my experience, in my perception of reality. And that's worthwhile too. And then there are other things that have completely changed for the better. I think one thing that happens to people sometimes is that the process of challenging these deep negative core beliefs isn't necessarily complete. And what I mean by that is, for example, often in cognitive behavioral therapy, we will challenge negative beliefs. We will try to dismantle them, but we're not necessarily focusing as much on affirming thoughts in their place. I mean, we will usually come up with one, but it's not necessarily like, okay, say this to yourself 10 times a day, every day for the next month. And conversely, in a lot of the self-help material, there's often an emphasis on affirmation, but the affirmations aren't necessarily specifically tailored to what you're going through. And there isn't often this emphasis on challenging and questioning the other thoughts. But in my experience, when you put those two things together, people can make profound change in their negative self-talk, their negative core beliefs. So the process is you question those core beliefs, really understand how they affect you, where they came from, and why they're not true. Why might these thoughts not be true? And then we come up with a healthier thought to believe or think instead, a compassionate thought, which becomes the affirmation. And as we say that to ourselves regularly, it's profound the kind of change that that can make. So I don't see a lot of that. I don't see a lot of these two things together. And I've experienced them be quite profound, both with myself and with my clients.
So, how does this relate in regards to relationships?
Oh, well, negative core beliefs can really impact relationships. One example of that, and I think a lot of people wouldn't even necessarily see this as a negative thought, but it can be a profoundly damaging one, is the fairy tale. A lot of people are walking around with the fairy tale notion of a relationship. This should just work. You know, we meet that special person and we just fit like a glove, and that's it. And that sets up an expectation of how a relationship should be that is unrealistic, because relationships take work. Some take more work than others, but no two people are 100% compatible. And in my experience as a therapist, the greatest predictor of relationship success is not raw compatibility. It's how willing people are to work on the relationship, to really get to know each other, to really practice communication strategies. You know, a lot of us didn't grow up with good modeling of relationships and communication, healthy modeling. So we have to learn that now. And if we have a belief that that is a sign that our relationship isn't the right one for us. Oh, well, this can't be a good relationship because it's not perfect from the get-go. Then that can lead to people walking away from situations that could be great. So that's one belief. And there are others too. You know, some people really believe, for example, that they should sort of people please as part of relationships. They might not consciously believe that, but it's subconsciously there. And that can really get in the way of a healthy relationship. So one of the things that we do in therapy, for example, is we surface these kinds of beliefs and really look at them and really challenge them and say, you know, because one other dimension of this is central to cognitive theory, is that how we think of things, what we believe on the conscious and subconscious level really impacts not only how we feel, but also what we perceive. So if I believe in the fairy tale notion of the relationship, maybe I don't even believe it consciously because I've had experiences, I'm older, but subconsciously, that's what I'm expecting from the right partner. When there's a problem of any kind, I'm going to feel like, okay, this is the end. Something's wrong. You know, I'm packing the suitcase in my mind because I'm perceiving in reality that this means catastrophe. But that all stems from that belief, that deep belief. Yeah. So those are some examples of beliefs in relationships that can really, really cause problems. Absolutely.
In your book, you talk about self love. And I
Mhm.
know of a lot of people, it's kind of like a buzzword. And I don't think many people know what that really means. And I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah. So I had mentioned earlier that there's a spiritual core in the book, and I do invite people to bring whatever their spiritual beliefs are to this approach. And even if they don't have spiritual beliefs, that's okay too. But where I focus on with self love is really this notion that, we come into this world as sacred beings, and we have worth just because of that. And we can learn to love ourselves through knowing that about ourselves, through connecting with the heart, through connecting with spirit, through connecting with nature, and really feeling the sacred presence that is there. Now, if somebody doesn't identify as spiritual, there are other ways to develop self-love too. But one of the best ones in my experience, it's not as much that we have to convince ourselves that we're worthy of love. It's as we dismantle the beliefs that were given to us by others that tell us that we aren't, we start to find the self-love that's already there. A lot of us don't love ourselves because of those beliefs or experiences we've had that have caused us to see ourselves in a negative light. So when we touch all of that with compassionate thinking, it melts away over time. And then this organic sense of our own worthiness grows. And as we talk to ourselves like a best friend, we experience that self-love. And then, of course, in the book, I talk about meditation and heart meditation and how beautiful that can be. But yeah, I mean, self-love, I think that the deepest self-love really comes from knowing what's already within us, discovering what's underneath the negative messaging we've received and things like that. And what's there is beautiful. And most of us knew that as kids, right? A lot of kids aren't running around with self-love issues. And when they are, it's because of external influences. Something's going on at home, something's going on in the community, things like that. So some of this work is about getting back to that, getting back in touch with that deep part of ourselves that doesn't doubt our worthiness, that doesn't need to be convinced that we're okay, that doesn't need to be convinced that we deserve to be loved. It's just there.
So, what are some of the weeds we need to be looking for? Because I know we talked about shame. What are some of the others that people can identify with that go, okay, I need to take a look at this and reassess where I'm at?
Yeah. So one of the fundamental practices is to really look at how you're feeling in your everyday life and how your thoughts are, and to consider if the thoughts that you're having that push your emotions into a negative or a difficult or a high state in a way that feels unhealthy, if those thoughts are distorted in some sense or biased in some sense, because that's usually what's going on. Thoughts might be skewed toward a lot of judgment, toward a lot of criticism. We might not be cutting ourselves enough slack. We might not be cutting other people enough slack. When people come to see me for treatment for depression and anxiety, they're usually having a lot of thoughts that are extreme, that don't hold water. So interestingly enough, the work in cognitive behavioral therapy, it's not about trying to make ourselves think very sunny, positive thoughts all the time. But if we can just get ourselves to even a more neutral place from the negative one, from the unsupportive one, then that can help most people feel a lot better. So just even walking around with the lens of, are the thoughts that I'm thinking really true? Are they really accurate? Am I being fair enough with myself? Am I being fair enough with others? One metaphor that some people will use is sort of like a courtroom of the mind. Does the judge, the wise, compassionate judge in my mind, just accept this thought? Or do they say, wait a minute, there's some issues with that thought. That's really got some bias there that's skewing things to make you feel worse. So that's one way, is to just to take approaches like that.
And, it kind of has me thinking with everything that we've talked about today. Do you have a affirmation that our listeners, I know it's a broad affirmation, but something that our listeners can use today as they go about their day?
Yeah, an affirmation that I think can help a lot of people is something like, I'm willing to open my mind to information that can help me experience greater healing and well-being in my life. And one of the beautiful things about that affirmation is that it really helps open a door. And when the door is open, a lot of wonderful experiences can come through. And for so many of us, that's the first step. It's really just being willing to change, willing to learn, and willing to receive. Because I'll also say in my experience, guidance is always coming to us, and amazing things can happen when we learn how to listen to it.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Sure, thank you. So my website is durgadasalonduriel.com, but the main places where I'm active are on social media. On Instagram, I have an account that is Durgadas Duriel. I also have an account specifically for affirmations, which is called Affirmations That Heal. And I'm on Twitter as Durgadas A. Duriel. I'm on Facebook as well, and hopefully going to be starting a newsletter or Discord server soon.
Well, Durgadas, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful being here.
Well, thank you, Durgadas. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Worthy as You Are. Weed out unhealthy beliefs and nourish your authentic self. Worthy as You Are is available to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.